I'd like to start by welcoming you all to our Cultures of Peace Festival of the Northeast 2021. This year, we have been looking at feminist responses to ecology through the lenses of activism, academia, and performing arts. As a part of the programming, we've been conducting various events, including a series of webinar, podcasts, video interviews on various aspects of ecology, climate crisis, performing arts, and creative arts in the Northeast. Cultures of Peace 2021 is curated by Angela Rangat and Thingnam Anjulika Samom. Today, in our fifth seminar of the festival, we have a prominent set of panelists, many of whom you might be familiar with. Eminent writer Mitra Phukan, Professor Dwijen Sharma, and Dr. Jomyir Jini will be discussing the relationship and linkages between women, ecology, and creative writing in the Northeast. The webinar seeks to highlight how environmental concerns and ecological understanding shape the works of women writers in Northeast. Our moderator for the day will be Anjulika. I'd like to go through a few set of introductions before we begin today. You might find some interesting links coming your way in the chat box. Zubaan is a feminist publishing house and NGO that chronicles and participates in women's movements in India and South Asia. Might also find the link to our website in the chat box. Cultures of Peace Festival of the Northeast is a collaborative project that Zubaan runs with Heinrich Böll Stiftung, Regional Office, New Delhi. The project aims at creating spaces for dialogue within civil societies in 8 northeastern states: Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Meghalaya, Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland, Tripura, and Sikkim, and other contiguous regions. Through diverse forms of cultural production, writing, music, film, theater, art, and more, this ever-evolving festival attempts to foreground many key issues that concern the region and its relationship with the rest of India or the mainland, against the broader framework of gender identities, indigenous rights, and peace building. In 2020, as a part of the 10th year celebrations for Cultures of Peace, a multimedia resource called the Media Archive was created to bring together the learnings from the past and to house video interviews, podcasts, artworks, and other materials that showcase the work of artists, writers, musicians, and other cultural practitioners who we have engaged with over the last decade. The building of the archive was supplemented by a series of online engagements centered around 2 themes: food cultures of the Northeast and women in music in the Northeast. 5 webinars and a film release were organized, and you can watch them on our YouTube channel, the link for which is given in the chat box. While the release of the other project materials, such as the video interviews, podcasts, essays, are underway, and you might find them on our website very soon. The festival curators were Honzo Borbora, who looked at the theme of food cultures, and Anungla Zoe Longkumir, who worked in music. This year, we will release curated materials from Cultures 2020, and we've been working on more resources in the form of essays, podcasts, feminist interviews, and feminist lab sessions. We'll be releasing them soon, and the idea is to further engagement and support the ongoing discussion in the Northeast. You can find out more about the project from the link in the chat box. Now, I'd like to move ahead and introduce the speakers for the day. Mitra Phukan is an Assamese writer, translator, and columnist who works in English. Her published works include 4 children's books, a biography, 2 novels titled Collector's Wife, which is a Zubaan release, and a Monsoon of Music. She has also published several volumes of translation and a collection of her columns. Her most recent works are a volume of her own short stories, A Full Night's Thievery, and translations of a volume of short stories, Guilt and Other Stories. Her own works, including her children's stories, have been translated into several languages and are taught in colleges and universities. She writes extensively on Indian music and theater, both as a reviewer and an essayist. Our second speaker for the day is Dr. Jomyir Jini. She's a writer, poet, and a dental surgeon from Arunachal Pradesh. She writes proficiently in both English and Hindi. Her debut poetry collection is titled Sanity in Vanity. She has also represented her state in the recent webinar organized by the Sahitya Academy titled International Day of the World's Indigenous People on the occasion of the 75th Independence Day. Professor Dwijen Sharma is the head of department Nihu Tura campus. He has written extensively on writings from Northeast, beside editing 2 books titled Indian Fiction and Translation, Issues and Explorations, and Writings from India's Northeast, Recovering the Small Voices. Thingnam Anjulika Samom is a writer and translator from Manipur. Now I'm going to go ahead and talk about some rules for the participants who are with us today. Please listen carefully. Your video and audio have been automatically turned off on entry to prevent accidental audio and video issues. Audience questions will be taken via the chat box, which we will close once we get a sufficient number of questions. However, the raise hand function will still be available to direct any queries to the panelists. We will start dealing with audience questions around 4:50 p.m. If there's any speaker in particular you want to direct your questions to, please make sure to mention that as well. This discussion will be recorded and posted online via our social media channels. If you choose to ask a question on the chat box, your name might be mentioned during the webinar. Entry has been moderated to guard against trolling. No hate speech, targeting, or discriminating against any community will be tolerated. Any persons engaging in such speech will be removed from the webinar without any warnings. Before quoting any speaker from this webinar in any printed or published medium, please make sure to write to us at contact@zubaanprojects.org for clearance. Please note that the participant details will be shared with Heinrich Böll Stiftung. Please write to us at contact@zubaanprojects.org if you'd like your participation to remain anonymous. Now I'd like to hand over to Anjulika, who's the moderator. Anju, please.
Thank you so much, Sadaf, for the introduction and for telling us about Zubaan and the program. Thank you again for the panelists, Mitra Phukan, Dr. Jomyir, Jini, and Professor Dwijen Sharma for joining us in this webinar today. When we talk about the Northeast, we talk about how rich the Northeast is, not just in terms of culture and literature, but also in terms of biodiversity. In fact, there are so many rich biodiversity hotspots in the Northeast, which we are about to lose in the wake of climate change and other ecological disasters that are happening around us. On the other hand, we have a rich culture of writing from the Northeast. We have people writing in so many languages, in English, in their traditional, in their indigenous languages and all. We have Padma Shri awardees like Mamangdai, internationally renowned writers like Mitra Phukan, Isteren Kire, Temsla Ao, etc. But we also have so many other writers who are also writing in their own languages. So that apart, in today's webinar, we are trying to see the interlinkages between how the writers view the environment and ecology around them and how it shapes their writing. So before we start, I would like to hand over to Dr. Jomyir Jini. I would like to ask her to read out one of her poems, which will set the tone of our discussions today. Jomyir.
Thank you so much for the time. Hello, everyone. I am Jomyir, and the title of my poem that I'll be reciting today is "मैं बदली मनुष्य को न भाया." Here it goes like this. एक से है हम, एक से नहीं भी. तुम पेड़ कहलाते हो, मैं मुसीबतों की जड़. तेरी शाखाएं सख्त, मेरी ठहरी अकड़. एक से है हम, एक से नहीं भी. तुम्हें पूजते हैं लोग, पूजा हमारी भी करते हैं. दिन के उजियारे में आरती, रात के अंधेरे में कपड़े उतारते हैं. एक से है हम, एक से नहीं. पतझड़ के मौसम में जब तुम्हारे पत्ते झड़ जाते हैं, तुम तब भी पेड़ ही कहलाती हो. पतझड़ के मौसम में जब तुम्हारे पत्ते झड़ जाते हैं, तुम तब भी पेड़ ही कहलाते हो. फिर जब किसी स्त्री का होता है शोषण, क्यों हम जाता है रोशन. वो कल भी थी स्त्री, आज भी है बस स्त्री. मौसम बदले सावन आया, मैं बदली मनुष्य को न भाया. एक से है हम और नहीं भी. तेरे पत्तियों के रंग बदलने पर बदलते हैं लोग नजरिया. तेरे पत्तियों के रंग बदलने पर बदलते हैं लोग नजरिया. फिर मेरी कोशिशों में क्यों इनको दिखती है बस कमजोरियां. मैंने अपने कमजोरियों की डोरी को बांध कर ढांढ, जब उठाई आवाज तो उसे शोर बताया गया। मैंने जब आंखों से आंखें मिलाई तो उसे घोर बताया गया। मेरे इन बढ़ते कदमों को घनघोर बताया गया। मेरी चुप्पी ही भाती है इसको, बस मेरी चुप्पी ही भाती है इसको। मौसम बदले, सावन आया, मैं बदली, मनुष्य को न भाया। जिंदगी के उतार चढ़ाव में, जिंदगी के उतार चढ़ाव में बीजे कई मैंने भी बोए हैं। कुछ जमीन तले दबे रोए हैं, कुछ बिस्तर समानो सोए हैं, कुछ हसीन ख्वाबों सा उड़ान उड़े हैं, कुछ रफ्तार पकड़े यूं दौड़े हैं। मौसम बदले, सावन आए, मैं बदली, मनुष्य को न भाया. That was my poem. Thank you so much for the time. I would like to hand over the time to our moderator.
So much, Jomyir. Your poem doesn't need any explanation. It is like it is telling us what we are going to discuss. I think from now, now I would like to call upon Mitra Baido. Mitra, can you tell us a bit about how ecology, the ecology around you has shaped your writing as well as writings of other writers that you know of?
Yeah, thank you, Anjulika. And thank you, Zubaan, for this opportunity to speak not just about my writing as regards to ecology, but also I want to base my little talk on the culture, the environment that I come from, writing environment, where in Assamese, I am Assamese. Assamese writings, they are centuries old, but and throughout there has been a very strong focus on ecology, on the world, the natural world around us, and even now in the 20th, 21st, later part of the 20th century and 21st century also, we see that in our writers, women writers especially, it's a very strong focus. I think the reasons for this is many, because even though I find that in other writings, in the writings of other languages, which I read in translation, or the writings, of course, in English, it is much more urban than what we are seeing in Assamese. And even though there are writers who live in cities, even though they are writing about cities, somehow the metaphors, the way, the base of their writings is always the natural, or very often the natural environment. These writings have a very strong connect to the natural world around them. Cities are usually there in a kind of a, it's mechanical, it is soulless. These are the things that we see when in general, when cities are described. And the other thing is that even those of us who write in English, I find that writers from other regions, Bengal or the states of South India, or of course, North India, the writers in English are much more urban. For instance, I have always lived my life in cities of various sizes. And yet when it comes to placing my work or situating my work, somehow it comes to me as a small town, whether it is short stories or novels or whatever, a small town. And today I was thinking about it. Why is this so? And I think maybe it's because, that gives me a space to straddle both the urban and the natural world. And that is, sorry, that is something that comes naturally to many of us who are right here, because often, even in poetry, or even, of course, even in fact, non-fiction, somehow what is brought in is the ecology, maybe sometimes the sense of loss that we are going through. I have seen or read many writings about, for instance, Kaziranga, the national park, and the question, the issue of the land being encroached so much by migrants, that illegally encroached, that the animals are now coming out. We often read of they're all coming out and attacking the human habitations for no fault of their own, of course, but because their own habitats are shrinking. This I find in many writings, and it also finds a space in fiction, poetry, of course. And I would like to say that it's, this is this bringing in of the natural world, the ecology, in both positive and negative ways, is negative in the sense that, is with the sense of loss, and the sense that we are losing it, what would happen to us, that we are on the verge of something disastrous. And as we know, the way things are going now, I think the disaster has already happened. We are just at the beginning of the disaster. So these things are being written about in fiction, poetry. And nature is very close to the Assamese culture in various forms of creative expression. Writing, of course, music, of course. Music, it often, there's so much, even today, when I know that some of the lyricists, they are actually very much city-based, and yet they go back again and again, maybe to memories or maybe to visits they have made to the countryside, and that focus is always there. That the green is also often a metaphor. Green is often a metaphor of life, of freshness, of rejuvenation. I have found that in many writings in Assamese, especially in poetry, among women. And there are other metaphors that seem to be a cultural continuation. In it's understood that green is something that we are losing, and it is something that is negative. It's absent in the cities, but and also that it is something that we should try to keep within ourselves. Our souls become a desert. I have come across this very beautiful metaphor. The soul is gradually becoming a metaphor, a desert, because the greenery is going away. And that is a recurrent metaphor in different forms in many of the writings. And of course, we in Assam, or in so many parts of the Northeast, India's Northeast, weaving, we are Mekhela Sadors, the traditional, or the Dokhanas, the traditional clothes that we wear are woven. And natural symbols, natural woven motifs are given there. In the mekhelas that I wear, or that we wear, they are stylized versions. They are stylized trees, for instance, with two little birds sitting there. Weaving, of course, you cannot, it is difficult to put in, it's usually, circular is a little more difficult. So it is in more in an angular form, but you have the trees, you have the birds, And in some cultures, in some tribes of India's Northeast, in Assam, they symbolize, they actually give a story. It is a story they are relating. You know, a bird is sitting, and these have been handed down through centuries, I would say, because they have been weaving these patterns. So it's very much part of various cultural expressions. Cooking, of course, a lot of us, I mean, I have lost the art, but a lot of people, even in cities with a little garden, they forage. You know, they go to the garden and lawn and pick up a few leaves, they pick up a few, you know, the way nature sustains us. And this I have found in several writings by women, not in fact by men, but writings by women, because they are usually in charge of the kitchen, if it's a village house, or if it is even often in the urban settings also. So this foraging, they go out and they pick a few leaves, or the fish is there, the fish, and how to cook that particular tenga or tangy curry with leaves and herbs, and sometimes even flowers. Flowers are brought and put into batter. And these activities are incorporated into stories. They are incorporated into stories. I myself have read them, and they give a beautiful connect to the world of nature around us. And the fact that we are losing this in many of the urban markets that we have, at least in Guwahati, these herbs are not there. And if you're living in a flat and they don't grow easily in pots, so it becomes difficult to. So I think in a way, you know, these stories, they record what we are losing. They record a way of life. They record also a kind of also a cuisine that is being lost. Even in the restaurants, you don't get these, I mean, they have no access to these fresh herbs unless they have a patch of land, which is rare in the cities. Then, of course, musical expressions, the lyrics, it's full. I mean, till a while ago, you know, if heartache was being described, there was a natural symbol. If joy was being described, then it was through the metaphor of flowers blooming, or greenery, as I said, greenery all around. So that is very much part of, and of course, Bihu, our folk form of Bihu. Bihu is actually a rural, as everybody people know, it is a rural folk expression. And the lyrics are often spontaneous, but they have a base, and that base is always very close to nature. So through these songs, through these lyrics, through these writings, there has been between an increasingly urban population, between a generation that it's losing its connect, which I have seen in other cities. It's losing. My parents had that connect, though they lived in cities for the longest times. But I have kind of lost that connect, though of course I always have natural symbols in my writings. I'll be coming to that. And so I think we are fortunate here. I think Anjulika can say also that even in the writings of so many of the writers who are doing, not just in Assam, but in I'm sorry, I got distracted. All the writers, without exception, I would say, they are absolutely, they do this. I mean, completely they are in touch with nature. And in my own writings, I find that, you know, they come very easily to me. For instance, the river Brahmaputra, it's a symbol of great power. It's a symbol, and it also brings always, this was pointed out to me, that the river is always there in your writings, and I think it comes unconsciously, and it came unconsciously. And greenery is also there. Sometimes it's an objective correlative. When the hills are bare, then there's some negative things are going on in the person's life. When they are greened again, then they become, the protagonist becomes a little bit more tuned to her more positive frame of mind. And I would like to end this by saying, talking about my very first book, which was a children's book. This is the one, Mamoni's Adventure. And it's a tiny little book, but it's about an elephant and how the elephant tries to eat the family's sugar cane, and how the girl, I mean, now we talk about man-elephant conflict, but this was way back in the 80s, and how she manages to become friends with the elephant and gives part of her food to them so that the elephant goes away. And of course, in my other books also, Collector's Wife, nature is very much, it's set in a small town, and it's very much a part of my writings. So I'd just like to conclude with this, and I hope I have made sense. But yes, ecology is very much a part of our writings here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitra Baido, for bringing out this interrelationship between nature around us and various forms of creative expression, not just in writing, but also in song, dance, and various art forms. We need that kind of analysis from time to time. And this kind of relationship which has been brought up has come up spontaneously on their own, mainly because human beings, and especially you pointed out how modern women's connectedness to nature, the nature around them. And on this note, I would like to call upon Professor Dwijen Sharma to give us an overview of this connection between nature and women among some of the women writers from the Northeast.
Late 1980s, we since the late 1980s, we see the women's voice who have been afraid of political context and giving a ray of hope for peace. Most of these women writers belonging to ethnic communities bring the oral traditions to contextualize the time. As the oral tradition is a pretext of naturescape, the ecology scape environment seeps into the expressions lining their world. Further, they have underscored the importance of traditional ecological knowledge, something which the capitalist patriarchal economy has destroyed in the last many years. To me, these women writers are very important, not because they are attempting to resolve conflicts, but because they are dealing with a significant subject which is imminent and non-negotiable. Today, the whole world is alarmed by the intensification of climate change. The ensuing landslides and floods in Kerala and Uttarakhand is a pointer in this direction to the effect of man-made ecological disaster, a course of anthropogenic cultural turn. The literature from this reason, they are diverse in form and produce ecological, which covered, classified, and I think is India, the creative of Temsulan, Mantankiza, Monte, Mangdai, Mitra Phukan, and others deal with humans and non-animate and inanimate things, culture, nature. They therefore be located in a region that cares for landscape with respect and city. And we have seen, how Mona Jote talks about the biodiversity in this region, because biodiversity is a matter of fact in nature. Because if the biodiversity is destroyed, definitely there would be a climate change, and that's what happening everywhere. It began with the colonial politics of forestation and forestry, and it carried on till in the new Oriental time as Mona's in protecting the natural and cultural diversity of our land. In her poem, Girl, Black Hater, and Blue Hibiscus, she saw an artificial universe, a human being, and a natural setting, and so animals, trees, and everything. I quote a poem: "Reasons insane because you left. The clouds will be novel and distant as always. The scent of citrus flower will fade in soft rose, and the girl put a biscuit in her hair until it becomes bitter and become a clean color, thing for first quiver of string. Uh, uh, is which is a very important because of the because of the plenty of grass crops and other kind of plantations that are not a part of a particular ecosystem. Our crops to says naturally those crops or plants or trees did not grow, and that is actually concern for more and for many of us. Now, having said this, I want to come to a very important point that Mitra has just talked about. Now,
Hi.
Hi, Anju.
I think the connection today all over the Northeast has been so bad
Yeah.
from morning onwards. Even my connection went. I'm so sorry about this. Dwijen, Dwijen, is he still there? I think his connection is.
Yeah, I don't think he can hear us.
I think his connection is quite bad like today also. So maybe we can move on to Jomyir, who will be reading us another poem. Hi.
Hello again. I think the network. I think
Yeah.
I am now.
Yeah. Please read us one more poem because we are so much in love with your first poem. We are waiting for another one.
Thank you so much for the time. It was lovely to listen to Ma'am Mitra, and we couldn't hear more from Dwijen sir, but for this time, I would like to read another poem. The title of my poem is "Haq Kiska Hai." तेरे नाम पे ये जो दाग है, रूह को पुकारती जो आग है, वो किसने लगाया? नाम तेरा है, हक किसका है? तेरे जिस्म की कीमत पूछता, गली में फिरता आवारा, वो कौन है? जिस्म तेरा है, हक किसका है? तेरे मांग में सिंदूर भरता, वो अजनबी, वो दूर का, वो कौन है? मांग तेरी है, हक किसका है? तेरी राहों को मोड़ता मरोड़ता, इन कदमों को कैद करता, वो कौन है? कदम तेरे हैं, हक किसका है? तेरे सतरंगी सपनों से रंग चुराता, काले रंगों का पिटारा खोलता, वो मदारी, वो कौन है? सपने तेरे हैं, हक किसका है? नाम तेरा है, हक किसका है? जिस्म तेरा है, हक किसका है? मांग तेरी है, हक किसका है? कदम तेरे हैं, हक किसका है? सपने तेरे हैं, हक किसका है? हक किसका है? That was my second poem. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much, Jomyir. And for our audience, it might be interesting to know that Jomyir Jini is a dental surgeon by profession, and she writes these wonderful poems, and she recites them with such a good voice that and the poems that she writes, like especially your first poem, "Main badli manushya ko na bhaya," the interconnectedness that you bring out between women and nature. I mean, in this case, a tree. That is the crux of what we would like to discuss today. And yeah, Mitra Baidu, I think Mitra, we would also love to have a small reading from Mitra, if possible, from a part of her work, where she can highlight how she has portrayed nature and women.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Do I do it now, or Jomyir, what
Yeah,
a
please.
lovely poem, what lovely poems you gave us.
Yeah. I think we would like to have your reading now, Mitra.
Okay, okay. So today we've had yesterday and today, after a terrible drought, we've had very heavy rains. All these extreme events are happening everywhere. And Assam is, of course, infamous for its floods. So in Collector's Wife, there's a lot of references to nature, but I would like to discuss, because it was raining so heavily yesterday and today, I would like to discuss read out something about the rains. And these rains which come here, that is also ominous. It's a part of something that is ominous, something bad that is going to come, because it's not that soothing rain. It's that actually that climate change rain, these extreme events that are coming to us. So I'll just read out a couple of paragraphs, Anjulika. The monsoon in Parvatpuri was always impressive. Rain-bearing clouds, black and heavy-bellied, billowed in from the south. The 1,000-kilometer journey over ocean and rivers, over the paddy fields of another country, over the range of low hills that bordered the district, brought them straight into Parvatpuri, where the clouds deposited their burden. For days, weeks, the sky was blotted out by wave after wave of cumulonimbus clouds that came rolling up, black and heavy, from beyond the southern end of the town, intent, it seemed, on drowning Parvatpuri. The monsoon, of course, had actually set in weeks ago, but the rain so far was nothing compared to the downpour now. Its constant drumming noise was everywhere. Sometimes it would thin to a drizzle, but within hours the wind would freshen and the downpour would begin again, suddenly, so heavy that people talking to each other indoors would be unable to hear themselves speak. The sun disappeared from view. The only inkling that the people of Parvatpuri had of its continued presence in the cloud-covered sky above them was a weak, gray, watery light, too feeble to even read by. Lights were needed, even at midday. Water was everywhere. It seemed to be at times the only element left on earth. Trees, bent with the weight of the rain on their leaves, gave up the unequal battle. Branches heavy with water snapped. Leaves fell to the ground in soggy bunches to be swept away by the gushing rivulets that swirled and eddied past. That's one page I have read. Let's hear the others. And yes, so I think one of the markers of climate change that's happening all around us is the change in the way the rains are coming to us. Days and days and days of terrible heat, which is what we had, unseasonal heat during the pujas. And yesterday and today, so much rain that the city has been flooded. These are extreme events. There's something wrong. And I think the bit that I read out was, perhaps, though it was written some time ago, even then, extreme events were happening. And it's perhaps a reflection of what I see or saw all around me. Anjulika.
It's very interesting, Mitra Baidu, how when we describe the rains, you were mentioning the rains and you were reading off, we talk about the clouds, and most times we say pregnant, we use the word pregnant, heavy bellied, how even the rain clouds have been feminized through our writings, through our conversation. And that is very interesting for me. And for our participants, if you would like to ask any questions to Jomyir, Mitra, or to Dwijen, please feel free to use the chat box. We apologize for the poor network today when somehow the network has been really bad. And we apologize because Dwijen could not speak or share as much of his on the topic as we would have wished for him to share with us. If you're interested, if you're interested, you could look up for some of the writings by Dwijen on the very topic that we are talking about how for a lot of the writers, consciously or unconsciously, nature becomes woman and woman becomes nature. And to talk about so many, and this happens to talk about so many things, not just about beauty or even the heart, but also to talk about how nature and women together are being oppressed and suppressed by patriarchal forces that this needs to be responded together. So we have a few questions coming up. There's a question from Kritika Bhuya. Hello everyone, I have a question for the panelists. As in literature, we often find the close association of nature with women while attributing mostly the feminine qualities to women, and often culture is often represented with masculine features and qualities. How far do we think such? I think, Simen, how far do you? I mean, I'm not very sure about the last line. I think Kritika meant to ask whether this is justified even now, how culture is attributed masculine qualities and nature is attributed feminine qualities. I think, Mitra, by reading out from your book, you have answered this a little bit today. So if any of you would like to take it, Dwijen, would you like to take it? If you are not able to connect to sound, you can write in the chat box. Yeah. Dwijen has just written something in the chat box for us. Maybe I can read it out, and maybe Dwijen, if you would like to take Kritika's question also, that would be good for us. Yeah, Dwijen writes, however, these ethnic communities, when they decided to settle down in these difficult topographies with unfavorable climate, they probably had in mind the abundance of natural resources available in the region. They used the natural resources readily available in these places, which Claude Lévi-Strauss calls bricolage, for their food, shelter, and clothes. Thus, each community negotiated with nature in specific ways, fashioning in return its culture. Each community, having settled in specific terrain, used the locally available natural resources, and therefore the culture of each one of these communities is unique and different from the other in terms of clothes, weaving, house architecture, materials, food, or as in types of cuisine, beliefs, games, rituals, etc. And initially, each community move around a particular terrain, doing Jum cultivation before settling down. Until that, the practice of Jum cultivation is noticeable. I think Dwijen wrote this because somehow this is what he wanted to convey. And Sumitra, can you do you think that this attribution of masculine quality to culture and feminine quality to nature is justified? even now?
I was thinking as you read it out, I don't think it's always true. For instance, I was talking of lyrics as literature, lyrics as poetry, which it is, of course. And I was remembering this Bhupen Hazarika song it's actually from a movie. I've forgotten the name of the movie, but it's a very popular song. Hukan Pahar, Nilaj Pahar, Bhang Bhang Toy, Bhang Bhang. So that means, you know, shameless hill, shameless mountain. Are you not ashamed? And you should now, out of shame, you should be disintegrating. This is not a feminine metaphor, okay? And of course, again, in Bhupen Hazarika's songs, this is I think very important point, is that for him, nature, that aspect of nature, Mahabahu Brahmaputra, he's always has Brahmaputra, the river, which is a metaphor in many ways in his songs, and even in his writings, it's a metaphor. That is very much Mahabahu Brahmaputra. Brahmaputra is the son of Brahma, and it has very masculine qualities. It has strength. It has, in his writings, it has a lot of power, which is what we see in the river, actually, the power and the strength. And for him, it is not just the actual river, it is also a metaphor. So I wouldn't say that nature is always feminized. No, I think it depends so much on the context also. At least in the literature of Assam. But on the other hand, in Orupa Patangia's works, for instance, it is, you know, you have nature in the form of leaves, you have it in the form of creepers, especially the feminine notion of a creeper, a vine climbing up a tree. These are also there, and these are part of she brings it into the character of the girl she is describing, of the woman she is describing. So I would say it is not a given that it has to be masculine or feminine. It depends on the context. It depends on what the writer is trying to say. And on the other hand, there is this very well-known writer, Purobi Bormudoy, who in this particular story, Mrigoya, or The Hunt, she talks, it's a metaphor. The hunt, the men, there are no women in the story. The men go out on a hunt, and the deer is, it's of course all metaphorical. It's an allegory. The deer is portrayed, nature in the form of deer is portrayed as feminine and a doe, actually. And so the men, of course, hunt and kill the deer, and the forest reverberates to the cries of the dying deer. So here, of course, nature is feminine, and the power is with the men. I mean, masculine, feminine, it's there. But it's not a given that it has to be that way. In many of her writings, there are different aspects of nature also, if that answers your question.
Thank you, Mitra Baido. Dwijen has written in that he would like to point out a few instances of where women and nature comes together or is exemplified. He refers to Mitra's book, The Collector's Wife, when the flurry of the river is described as is described in this manner. The Red River is fed, wearing its full monsoon regalia. It was indeed red here, red with the topsoil washed down from the high mountain plateau above, red with the tumultuous volume of water that rushed through this cleft between two hill ranges, red with the fury at being thus confined, red with violence that raged on its banks. So in this passage, the anger of the river is furious, and like it's almost like saying that nature rebounds with equal vigor if it is disturbed. So perhaps, Mitra, you were referring to the ecological wisdom that if nature is dominated recklessly, it becomes furiously violent. The flood is an expression of the fury of his fury being violated by men for his selfish gain. And this is such a marvelous way of putting it. Dwijen also refers to Mona Lisa Chankiza's poem of a people unanswered, when she presents the human-induced destruction of ecology by saying, yes, I've seen our rice fields turn into factories and mills, our green hills reduced to barren brown, our rivers have dried, and our sparkling fish and our once sparkling fish lie dead on sandy banks. That by itself doesn't need any explanation. How the ecology around us has been destroyed, is being destroyed by our human activities. And yeah. So is there any other question from the, let me just have a look. Even if before we go to other questions, there was something that I wanted to ask Jomyir. Jomyir, when you were writing your first poem, Me Badli Manushya Ko Na Bhaya, what inspired you for this poem?
My poem that says "मैं बदली मनुष्य को न भाया." I think even from the title itself, it starts with connecting how we are facing such drastic climate changes, and it definitely does not suit. It's not suitable for humanity, the changes that we are seeing. And in the same way, in a parallel world, I wanted to say this, that we have been very successful in having this generation of women who are so strong and so independent. And this is a success that humanity has achieved, while on the same side, we failed to raise our sons in the manner that they can accept women as a very strong character in their life. We still have men who think that women are fragile, are supposed to be fragile. So even from the title itself, I wanted to highlight on this, that I have changed as a woman, but to some still, yet I may not be very acceptable when I'm so strong, and they feel very intimidated next to me as a man. They would still want me to be that shy little girl next to them, just not saying anything. But this is what I wanted to take my stand on this, that how the environment is changing day by day, and it is we must change along with them, and we must take precautions to help to change the direction, that it doesn't go towards destruction. And in the same way, how women are changing, we must accept them. In their stronger points, we must support them, and in their weaker points, we must help them to build themselves. So that's how I was trying to correlate throughout the poem. And there are good things about it, and there are bad things about it. So all the poem, it's not about, it's not always smiles, but it's sometimes tears. So the poem doesn't go along in a just happy mood, but there are questions that it raises, and there are the sorrows that it mentions, like how in the very end, it says that it's not always, it says that BJ kai maine bhi boye hain, like as I have tried so many things in my life, some of them have been successful, some of them are yet to reach their destination. So it says like, बीजे कई मैंने भी बोए हैं, कुछ जमीन तले दबे रोए हैं, कुछ बिस्तर समानो सोए हैं. Some have been successful, Some are still here trying to reach its destination. Some of the dreams that I have dreamt, some of the things that I want to achieve are yet to be achieved, like not completed yet. And it says, कुछ हसीन ख्वाबों सा उड़ान उड़े हैं, कुछ रफ्तार पकड़े यूं दौड़े हैं. Some have been beautiful. Some of the things that I wanted, I have got it. Not just me as an individual, but as womanhood, all of us. We are yet to achieve few things. We have achieved few things, and we are still in process to reach to that when we don't have to use the word women empowerment anymore, because we will be granted that women are empowered. Like, it will be a granted word. You know, I don't want to be asked about women empowerment as individually, because we do not talk about men empowerment to a man. It's taken granted. So that's the day I look forward to live in an era where I will not be questioned about empowered women anymore, because it'll just be granted. And that is how I ended my poem. It said, "Mausam badle sawan aaya, main badli manushya ko na." Thank you so much for giving me this time.
Thank you, Jomyir. Just one other thing. How do you relate your poems to growing up in your community, like surrounded by all the beautiful nature and the current ecological development issues? There's also a lot of issues going on in Arunachal, like dams and everything. So how do you relate your poetry to that also?
Here in the lines where I mentioned that तेरे पत्तियों के रंग बदलने पर बदलते हैं लोग नजरिया, like that. Because we have modern problems and we need modern solutions. We cannot just rely on what we have been doing, because if, like, how do I say? When we had kacha houses, we had these roofs that were made of leaves, and those houses are really cool to live in. When I visited village last time when I visited my grandparents, it seems my dad had remodeled the house for them, and now they have a tin, like tinted. The roof is not made up of leaf anymore, and it was really hot. And that was when I thought that we need fan now. Even in village, I need fan. There was only one table fan. There was no ceiling fan, because we have ceiling fans at home in our towns. But when I used to go back to my grandparents' home, it was not a necessity. And the house was very cool. It was a kacha house with a leaf on top of it. And it was very cool to live in. But last time when I went, it had been changed, and there was this tin roof over it, and there was no ceiling fan. So it was very hot. So the way I have mentioned it is like, with this modern time, we are getting modern problems, and we need modern solutions to it. Like, now that there is a tinted roof, there needs to be a ceiling fan. It's not going to be cool anymore. So in that way, I think growing up, there are so many changes around us. Every single day, there is something new happening, and I feel like we need new ideas to tackle new problems. We need to see things through a perspective. That's what I mean.
Thank you, Jomyir. You are as eloquent when explaining things as you are when you are writing poems. So we are way past 5 p.m. We started a little bit late, and there was a lot of internet problems in between. But I think we have time to just take one more question from Silva Mara, addressed to you, Mitra. Mitra ma'am, I would like to ask this question. Does myth and memory play a role when it comes to Northeast literature? What role does myth and memory play in your case when you take a pen and paper as a writer? We do know that writers take pieces from myths now and then, but how does it give meaning or significance to writings of today?
Yes, myth of course is very much a part of writings from this region, India's Northeast. People like, for instance, Mamang. It's full of beautiful allusions to myths, which she brings in, and then she comes out of it. It's beautiful. And of course, the poets of Meghalaya, they are so many allusions to myths and legends, which come in very relevant and very beautiful ways. Also in Assamese writings, myths are there, and legends, I mean, and stories, folk stories. For instance, there is this story of Tejimola. Tejimola is again a metaphor of nature, and how she regenerates, a metaphor also nature as well as women. I mean, she's tried to kill, I mean, they try to kill her, they do kill her, but she is always regenerating as a bird, as a creeper, as a vegetable plant, in so many ways, and as a flower. So yes, and in my own work, myths do come in, but what does come in, which I would say is also part of our legacy, our heritage, is songs, or especially, you know, ancient songs brought down to us over so many centuries or so many decades, definitely. And those are part very much, I mean, it comes naturally to me. They come to me as relevant pieces, which come which I incorporate in my stories. Myth, yes, definitely. This Kali myth, I mean, the Kali story, mythology of Kali, it has come in several short stories where, as a symbol not just of destruction but of justice. Kali for me is a symbol of justice, and she makes her appearance in several of my short stories. I think even in Collector's Wife, she's there as somebody who is, you know, looking at all the destruction she's a metaphor of destruction in this, all the destruction that's going around her. So yes, it does come, and but I think people like, I have found that people, I don't know, this is probably a very general statement, people, writers in English, I'm talking of writers in English who are writing from the hills. For instance, Arunachal, Nagaland, Mizoram, Meghalaya, to some extent Manipur also. They are much more they are bringing in myths much more than Assam, the valleys do. Assam is not so much. I think Tripura also, what I have read, is not so much. So there's something about that, the hills and the valleys. I mean, that's just my take on it. There's no research done on it. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you so much, Mitra. When you talked about Tejimola and how,
Right.
and how time and time again the human forces tried to kill her off, and she was suppressed, oppressed, and but how she regenerated and how
Right.
she became, and it talks a lot about nature also, about women also, despite all human activities, all aggressions against her, against nature, how nature is resilient, how it regenerates, and the same goes for women also. Like,
right.
Yes, in many ways that we are resilient, and yes, like nature, we will come up again no matter what happens. And it is time that we end our lovely discussion here. Thank you so much for joining us, Jomyir and Mitra and Dwijen. Let's meet again once more, and that time I hope the internet gods would be a little more merciful to us. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anju, and thank you everybody for this really amazing discussion. We feel really bad about the internet troubles that were happening, although Dwijen did manage to write some of what he was trying to say, but it would have been a lot nicer if you were able to hear it from him. Thank you everybody. Thank you to all the participants also for staying with us. And the recording of this webinar will be put on our YouTube channel, and along with the recordings of our previous webinars. You can view all of them and various other recordings from our previous webinars of different projects like Fragrance of Peace, Cultures of Peace, Through Her Lens, Reframing the Domestic, A Crisis of Care, Feminist Perspectives on the COVID-19 Pandemic and Lockdown in India. You can go to our YouTube channel to see all of these videos. Our next webinar, which will be the last webinar of this series, is on Wednesday, 27th October from 4 to 5 p.m. And we will continue to engage with the issues raised in these conversations through future webinars. So please continue to follow us. You can keep checking our social media for all the links, registration links, and all the information about our next webinars. Have a good day and goodbye.